They were about to step into a case that felt less like real life and more like a crime thriller, complete with a bullet silencer trick straight out of a movie. There were pieces of a potato scattered near Jocelyn's body. It was the kind of thing you'd expect to see in a Hollywood script, not in the murder of a pregnant schoolteacher. When detectives had arrived, the first thing they noticed was what wasn't there. There were no broken windows, nothing suggesting that someone had forced their way inside. Jocelyn's apartment building had strict security measures. The keys were specially designed and couldn't easily be duplicated, which meant whoever walked in that night didn't force their way. They had a key. That man was 42-year-old Cornelius Green. Just hold your horses for a minute because I'll come back to tell you just how much of a monster Cornelius would turn out to be. To understand the size of this loss, you have to understand that Jocelyn Peters was not just carrying her own life, she was carrying her daughter's baby, Micah Lee. To the people who knew Jocelyn, this wasn't just another crime scene. This was the loss of someone who had dedicated her entire life to helping others, just like this friend would later share about the kind of person Jocelyn was. Jocelyn was the kind of teacher who went above and beyond. She wasn't someone who simply showed up, taught a lesson, and went home. She was constantly searching for new ways to reach her students. She believed every child had potential, and she wanted every one of them to succeed. As Jocelyn's auntie Deirdre would put it, it seemed Cornelius was going to be the best father.
Jocelyn felt that he'd make a wonderful father.
Jocelyn loved Cornelius deeply, but what she would later realize was that Cornelius's affections were only directed towards himself, not even to his own unborn child. Just like Jocelyn, Cornelius was an award-winning educator. He was the principal at Carr Lane Visual and Performing Arts Middle School. He and Jocelyn had been together for about 5 years. Although they didn't officially live together, they were in a serious relationship, and he was the father of her unborn child. Back inside the apartment, investigators found that Jocelyn had been busy putting together invitations to her baby shower on the bed before falling asleep, unaware of the horror that awaited her and her baby. She had even written a guest list, but instead of a celebration, investigators were now processing her own murder scene. The apartment itself told investigators something important. It didn't look like there had been a struggle or a confrontation because everything in the home looked like it was in usual place. But there were a few pieces of evidence that immediately stood out. Jocelyn's cell phone was missing, and a single shell casing from a .380 caliber.
This is where the story takes a wild turn. Stephanie hadn't just met Philip Cutler recently. She had known him for years. In fact, he had stood as a groomsman in her wedding to Cornelius Green. Think about that for a second. The same Cornelius who was in a serious relationship with Jocelyn and also the father of her baby. The same man being interrogated for her murder is actually a married man all this time. Stephanie and Cornelius had a young daughter, but the couple had stopped living together for several years. They'd been separated. I need you to keep that information. And the next breakthrough would come from something most people never think twice about: a phone. Investigators obtained access to phone records connected to both Cornelius Green and Philip Cutler, and what they found would change the direction of the case. Remember the bag of potatoes investigators found on Jocelyn's dining table? Investigators found out that Jocelyn had planned to go to the grocery store 2 days before Cornelius had planned to travel to Chicago. But Cornelius had asked her to wait for him, and when she insisted, he would meet her there. They said he admitted receiving $2,500 from Cornelius Green. Why was Cornelius sending thousands of dollars to someone who was later connected to Jocelyn's murder? Investigators believed they knew the answer. But first, they had to uncover where that money came from, and what they found made the case even more disturbing. In early March 2016, just weeks before Jocelyn's death, a theft report had been filed at Carr Lane Middle School, the same school where Cornelius was the principal. That missing money came from funds raised by students on the school's dance team. According to investigators, there were several separate thefts that added up to approximately $2,700. And the person who had access to those funds? You guessed right, Cornelius Green. Detectives believed the money stolen from students was the same money later sent to Philip Cutler. Their theory was that Cornelius had taken money meant for children and used it to pay someone to silence Jocelyn forever, the same woman carrying his child. But the question is, why? Why would Cornelius want his pregnant girlfriend gone? By June of 2016, investigators traveled to Muskogee, Oklahoma to arrest Philip Cutler. For Jocelyn, it was becoming frustrating. She was preparing for motherhood, building her career, and planning the next chapter of her life, but she felt like she was doing it alone. That was until the family vacation. In January 2016, Jocelyn celebrated turning 30-year-old by planning a belated birthday cruise to the Bahamas. She invited her family, she invited Cornelius, and at first it was supposed to be a happy trip. But, according to Jocelyn's mother and aunt, something felt different about Cornelius.
I mean, he was not attentive to her needs.
A week after the cruise ended, Jocelyn Peters was found dead. Months before that day, Cornelius had been planning something disturbing. He had searched online for ways to end a pregnancy. Those searches included information about obtaining medications and ways to hide them in foods or drinks. The searches continued, but there was no evidence that he successfully carried out any of those plans, because Jocelyn was still pregnant. But those searches revealed something important about Cornelius's state of mind. He may have been looking for a way out, a way to avoid the responsibility of fatherhood, a way to avoid the financial and personal commitment that came with baby Micah Lee. Or maybe he had hoped Stephanie and him were going to be a family again. Investigators also discovered that Cornelius had purchased a .380 semi-automatic handgun years before Jocelyn's murder, the same caliber as the shell casing found inside Jocelyn's bedroom. However, the weapon itself was never recovered. While at this point prosecutors had a possible motive, a lot of the evidence was circumstantial. There was no video showing the murder, no recovered weapon, no single piece of evidence that answered every question. For years, Cornelius Green maintained his innocence. He insisted he had nothing to do with Jocelyn's murder. By 2022, the Jocelyn Peters murder investigation had been ongoing for nearly 6 years. The case had moved slowly through the system, but federal prosecutors eventually took a closer look at the evidence, and they saw something that immediately stood out. This wasn't just a murder case. They believed it was a murder-for-hire case, a case involving multiple states, a payment sent from Missouri to Oklahoma, and an alleged agreement between two people to take out Jocelyn and her unborn child. That made it a federal case. She knew the jury needed context before they could fully grasp the weight of the case. She wanted them to understand the complicated relationship between Cornelius Green and Jocelyn Peters in the days leading up to the murder.
I think it had increasingly been.
According to prosecutors, Cornelius had a motive. They believed he was trying to escape the life he had built with Jocelyn, a life that included a baby he may not have wanted. They argued that Jocelyn's pregnancy represented a responsibility Cornelius was trying to avoid, and instead of ending the relationship, prosecutors said he made the decision to eliminate the problem entirely by hiring someone else to silence her. But before the trial could begin, Cornelius Green's defense team had a major challenge ahead of them. The prosecution's case was built mostly on circumstantial evidence. There was no murder weapon, no eyewitness to the shooting, no direct recording of a conversation where Cornelius ordered the killing. Instead, prosecutors had to convince a jury that all the individual pieces pointed to one conclusion, that Cornelius planned Jocelyn's murder. Then, after 8 years of waiting, a major development happened. On February 28, 2024, just 2 weeks before the scheduled trial, Cornelius Green changed his plea. He pleaded guilty to federal charges connected to Jocelyn Peters' murder. The plea agreement included charges of conspiracy to commit murder and the murder itself. And as part of the factual basis for the plea, prosecutors stated that Cornelius had paid Philip Cutler to kill Jocelyn. After years of maintaining his innocence, he was finally admitting responsibility in court. With Cornelius Green's plea, the focus shifted completely to Philip Cutler. Unlike Cornelius, Philip wanted a trial. He still maintained that he was not responsible for Jocelyn's murder. But prosecutors argued that explanation did not make sense. Why would someone immediately destroy innocent information during a homicide investigation? To them, it showed consciousness of guilt. After hearing all the evidence, the jury reached a decision. Philip Cutler was found guilty. The man prosecutors said carried out the murder was convicted. And for Jocelyn's family, it was another step toward accountability. Both Philip Cutler and Cornelius Green ultimately received 2 consecutive life sentences. 2 lives were taken, Jocelyn Peters and her unborn daughter, Micah Lee. And after 8 years of uncertainty, the legal system had finally reached its conclusion. But even after the verdict, one question still lingers. Why? Cornelius Green had a respected career. He was an award-winning principal. Jocelyn Peters was an award-winning teacher. Together, they looked like the kind of couple people admired. They were educated, successful, and preparing to welcome a baby into the world. From the outside, they appeared to have everything. But appearances can hide painful realities. According to prosecutors, Cornelius had spent months trying to avoid the future that Jocelyn was excited about. Instead of being honest about his fears, instead of ending the relationship or admitting the truth about his marriage, investigators believe he chose deception after deception until he believed there was no way back. That decision didn't just destroy one life, it destroyed countless others. Jocelyn's mother lost her daughter. Her family lost a beloved sister, niece, and friend. Her students lost a teacher who believed in them every single day. And a little girl named Micah Lee never had the chance to take her first breath. The ripple effects of a single decision can last forever. One of the most heartbreaking parts of this case is knowing how close Jocelyn was to beginning the next chapter of her life. She had already chosen her baby's name. She was preparing invitations for the baby shower. She had dreams of buying a home and raising a family. Those ordinary moments, planning a celebration, writing a guest list, imagining the future, became heartbreaking reminders of everything that was stolen. Cases like this also remind us that investigations are often solved because detectives refuse to ignore the smallest details. A few pieces of potato on a bedroom floor, a missing cell phone. Individually, none of those clues told the whole story, but together they created a picture that prosecutors believed proved exactly what had happened. Justice didn't arrive quickly. Jocelyn's family waited nearly 8 years before the criminal case finally reached its conclusion. 8 years of court hearings, delays, unanswered questions, and painful reminders of what they had lost. No sentence could ever bring Jocelyn or Micah back. But for her loved ones, the guilty verdicts meant that the people responsible would never again be free to hurt someone else. Perhaps the greatest way to remember Jocelyn isn't by focusing only on how her life ended, but by remembering how she lived. She was the teacher who encouraged children to believe in themselves. She was the daughter who stayed close to her family. She was the friend people could depend on. And she was a mother who loved her unborn daughter long before she ever had the chance to hold her. That is the legacy her family wants people to remember. While Cornelius Green and Philip Cutler will forever be remembered for one of Missouri's most disturbing murder-for-hire cases, Jocelyn Peters deserves to be remembered for something far greater, a life dedicated to kindness, education, and helping others. Sometimes the loudest lesson from a true crime story isn't about the crime itself. It's about how greed, lies, and selfishness can destroy countless innocent lives in an instant. And it's about why honesty, accountability, and compassion will always matter far more than protecting a secret. What makes this case so disturbing isn't just the outcome. It's the amount of planning investigators believe went into it. This wasn't a crime committed during an argument or a split-second decision fueled by emotion. According to prosecutors, Every major step had been thought through long before the trigger was ever pulled. Investigators believed Cornelius Green had carefully built an alibi that would place him hundreds of miles away from St. Louis. In this case, literally swallowing potential evidence. Then there was another question investigators could never ignore. Why Jocelyn? Everyone who knew her described the same person, a devoted teacher, a caring daughter, a loyal friend, someone excited about becoming a mother. No evidence suggested she had enemies or was involved in anything dangerous. Instead, prosecutors argued the motive had nothing to do with Jocelyn herself. They believed the motive centered on what her future represented: marriage, fatherhood, financial responsibility, and the possibility that Cornelius Green's double life was about to collapse. According to evidence presented during the case, Cornelius had kept significant parts of his personal life hidden. While building a future with Jocelyn, he was still legally married. As Jocelyn became increasingly serious about buying a home and raising their child together, prosecutors argued those two worlds were moving toward an unavoidable collision. Eventually, something would have to give. Instead of telling the truth, investigators believe he chose the unthinkable. One decision, one payment, one life-ending plan that destroyed countless innocent lives. The tragedy didn't stop with Jocelyn. An unborn baby lost the chance to experience life. Parents lost a daughter. Students lost a teacher who believed in their potential. All Jocelyn ever did was love him. Jocelyn Peters was 30 years old, preparing to welcome her daughter into the world. Instead, her family is left with memories and a loss they will carry forever. But her story isn't only about tragedy. It's also about resilience, about paying attention to the small signs in our own lives, and about valuing the promises we make to those we love. And protecting ourselves sometimes means listening to the quiet warnings we'd rather ignore. Now, I would like to ask you, if you were in Jocelyn's shoes, what signs do you think you would have noticed, and would you have acted on them? Now, if you've never left a comment on any story I've shared on this channel, this is the one I'd love to hear your thoughts on. Your comment could help another mother, another family, or someone facing a similar situation.